The coming police state USA. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. And now you can find Bold and Blunt not just at the Washington Times, but you can find Bold and Blunt at Edify, E-D-I-F-I, Edify online. You can download the app as well. And this is a platform for Christian-based podcasts. And I encourage you to go and check out not just my podcast there, but all the products that Edify has to offer. These are great inspirational, motivational podcasts with a faith-based angle. And in these dark times, who doesn't need a little bit of faith to buoy you, to get you through the day, right? Well, today's podcast, Police State America. This is where we're rapidly heading under the coronavirus. And I have a story today. About a mother who very nearly lost custody of her child, not because she was a drug user, not because she was an alcohol abuser, not because she was a child abuser, but because she did not have the COVID-19 vaccine. Yes, a judge actually ruled that she could not see her 11-year-old son, that the father would have full custody until she acquiesced and got the COVID-19 vaccine. This is where we're headed. This is really where we're headed, America? Yes, this is where we're headed. The left is successfully using the coronavirus to clamp down on all sorts of individual God-given liberties that we have just assumed that we have in this country because, according to the foundations of this country, we do in fact have these rights. It's only under this last year and a half of the coronavirus that the left has told us successfully, I'm sad to say, successfully, that we don't have these rights, that they're not natural, they're not inherent to being a born American, that we have to actually petition our government for certain rights. And the list of rights that we are having to petition our government for is growing longer and longer and longer. The latest being this horrible, abysmal, horrific ruling. The good news is hours later, the judge, probably under some sort of pressure from the community or from other attorneys or from, I don't know, leftist insiders who decided that he was pushing the button too far, too fast, and they asked him to hold off on taking this dramatic action until the goalposts could be moved a little bit further down the field toward communism. But whatever the reason, the judge reversed his ruling on that particular facet of the custody case. And so this woman, this mother, does not have to get the COVID-19 vaccine as a condition of seeing her child. But look, that's not the point. That's not a win. It's not a win when government strips you of a right that you automatically have just because you're a human, a child of God. It's not a win when someone strips you of that right and then decides, for whatever reasons, to give it back. That's not to be cheered or applauded or celebrated. The problem is when the right was stripped in the first place. That's the problem. The fact that somebody could see fit to go that far, to steal a personal individual liberty. The fact that that individual liberty was in jeopardy at all. That's the point. Let me put it to you this way. If a thief breaks into your home and steals your precious jewels out of your safe or steals your petty cash box, and then hours later, for whatever reason, perhaps being caught by the police, gives it back, are you supposed to thank that thief at his or her generosity at returning to you the items you already owned? No. You own them. Why should you feel grateful? You may feel relieved. You may feel happy that you got your stuff back. But why would you feel grateful to somebody returning property they stole from you? Well, keep that in mind as you listen to the specifics of this case. And just a quick heads up of my guest today, Anthony Sabatini. He is a repeat Bold and Blunt guest, and I have him on the show because he is not only a member of the House of Representatives down in Florida, a Republican member, but he is also an attorney, and he has been actively fighting, using his law degree for good use during this last coronavirus year and a half of chaos that has come over our Constitution and questions about our constitutional liberties. He has been fighting in the courts, using his law degree to fight for individual rights. And so I like him on the show because he gives some motivation and inspiration during these dark, anti-American times that we are seeing not go away one bit. That 2 weeks flatten the curve thing is so far gone from our memories. We are now fighting for the right to keep our kids in court because we're not vaccinated. So this is where we're at in America, and Anthony Sabatini is going to talk about some legal issues, give updates on what he's been doing in Florida, and offer some advice for those outside of Florida who are looking for legal assistance on their own coronavirus clampdown fights. And before I get into even the specifics of the case, I want to mention, of course, as I do every show, the Washington Times gives a special discount for listeners of Bold and Blunt to obtain a year's access to the digital platform of all the Washington Times has to offer: news, commentaries, and all the podcast products. Just go to washingtontimes.com/Cheryl and you can get a sizable discount, a 50% discount off a year's digital subscription to the Washington Times. And I ask you to do this because I would like you to support the Washington Times, because there are few news sources out there that you can trust. And I happen to be a little bit biased because I'm employed by the Washington Times. But the reason that I stay with the Washington Times is because the Washington Times has a real commitment to bringing you the truth that counters the far left agenda that's being pushed through the mainstream media, which partners, of course, with the Democrat Party, which is little more than the socialist/communist party. And I appreciate the fact that the Washington Times stands alone in giving you truths that you need to fight this far left agenda that's crippling America from within, that's crumbling our Constitution from within. So I ask you to please subscribe. Maybe you're in your car listening to this, maybe you're on your walk, but just keep in the back of your mind when you get to a computer or you get to some sort of place where you can type in washingtontimes.com/Cheryl to do so, please, and help us out, help keep the Washington Times up and running. So now this horrible case. Let me read to you some of the details of this horrible case. Here's the title from ABC News. Judge strips unvaccinated Illinois mom of rights to see son. An Illinois judge has barred a divorced mother from seeing her 11-year-old son because she isn't vaccinated against COVID-19. Did you ever think you would see the day that a headline like this would run in America? Let me read you from the story. An Illinois judge has barred a divorced mother from seeing her 11-year-old son because she isn't vaccinated against COVID-19. Rebecca Furlitt's lawyer said the judge, not Furlitt's ex-husband, raised the issue during a recent child support hearing. They have been divorced for 7 years and share custody of the boy. The Chicago Sun-Times reported this is one of the first such rulings of its kind. Listen to how it went down in court. So again, from ABC News, Cook County Judge James Shapiro. And let me just say, this guy has no business running a courtroom. He has no business being a judge. Impeachment is for judges like James Shapiro. But anyhow, Shapiro asked the 39-year-old mother during an online hearing on August 10th if she was vaccinated. When she said no, the judge withdrew her rights to see the boy until she gets vaccinated. And this is what she says. This is a quote now from her. "I was confused because it was just supposed to be about expenses and child support." Her hearing was supposed to be just about expenses, child support. Imagine going in to a courtroom thinking you're just going there for some standard updates with your child support, and then the judge strips you of your rights to see your child because of a vaccination status. I was confused because it was just supposed to be about expenses and child support. I asked him what it, meaning the shot, had to do with the hearing, and he said, "I am the judge and I make the decisions for your case." Are you serious? The judge has absolute authority over your rights as a parent to see your child. This is the devastations of civil liberties that have befallen America because of the coronavirus. And look, some of us could see the writing on the wall way back, when the government was first issuing crackdowns and clampdowns and telling us to stay out of church, to stop singing in church, to stay off the streets, to stay out of work, to stay home. Some of us could see that the path that was leading was to just this type of court hearing, where a judge actually thinks, because you as a parent don't have the COVID-19 vaccine, that he or she has the right to deem you unworthy, unfit, a danger to your child. It's only going to get worse. I can say this with assurance that if Americans en masse, if Americans don't start bucking this unconstitutional, un-American tide that's sweeping the nation at the hands of the left, then court cases like this woman is facing, that'll be norm. The state will use whatever arbitrary standards it wants to strip you as a parent of your rights to parent your child. Don't have the vaccine? You're unfit to parent. Don't get the next vaccine, the booster shot, the third booster shot that Anthony Fauci has just so helpfully advised we all need to get. You're unfit to parent. You lose your rights to parent your child until you get that third booster shot. And wait, there'll be another pandemic coming. There will be another health crisis coming. The emergency of the coronavirus has never been reeled back by most government entities. We're still living under this emergency cloud. Let me play a clip of some of the coverage of this court case from WGN Channel 9, and it includes an interview with the mother, with Rebecca Fertlet. Here we go.
We really need to make sure all of our children are safe.
That's the question now in family court.
The judge did what I thought was right.
Is a parent who refuses to get vaccinated endangering their children?
It's turned into just a complete nightmare.
That's the mother. That's the mother right there, Rebecca Fertlet. She's talking about what happened in court, the nightmare that she is now living under because of her choice, her personal choice not to take the vaccine. And she will explain why she decided not to take the vaccine. But really, why does she even have to explain that? Why? Why do Americans have to explain to court pinheads why they decide not to take a vaccine? How about this as a reason? It's my right. How about not even asking the question, why didn't you get the vaccine? Whose business is it? If you're an American citizen, the default factor is your individual choice, your individual right. The default isn't having to prove why you choose to exercise your individual choice. And did you catch the legal advisor? The guy who said before Rebecca Fertlet just spoke, did you catch how he said the judge made the right decision? There are far too many Americans out there who agree that the judge made the right decision. This is despicable, and this shows how far, how deep the left has been able to get its tentacles into the Constitution under this coronavirus. I'm telling you, civil disobedience in mass is the only way to put a stop to this huge government overreach under the coronavirus. Okay, let's go back to WGN 9.
The issue came to light recently in a Cook County courtroom in a child support hearing. A judge asked the mother whether she was vaccinated.
I had a severe reaction to a vaccine in the past, and
That's the mother.
I am scared to get the vaccine.
When she said no, the judge ordered she could not see her 11-year-old son.
Unreal.
I just want to see my child.
Normally, when we talk about endangering a child, we're talking about a parent with a substance abuse issue or who's physical against the child.
I am miserable. I miss my son so much.
The same judge reversed course this morning, vacating the portion of his order about the vaccine.
Yeah, so the judge, like I said at the outset of this story, he reversed course, right? But it's not final. He left open the doors to reverse course again. So in other words, he floated out there that you can't see your son unless you get the shot. And then he pulled back on it. And then he floated out there again that he's going to keep the door open on bringing this mandate back into the custody case. Impeach. Get rid of this judge now. Get rid of this judge now. All of America should be outside this courtroom petitioning for the immediate removal of this judge. That would be the sane response. But you know what's happening? What's happening is people in the media like me are just covering this case, right? Giving you the information you need to know how far we've gone from the path of civil liberties in this country, individualism toward collectivism, and people listening or watching or reading about this case. Some of us are expressing outrage, other of us are agreeing with the judge, and that's kind of where it stands. What's going to happen is there's going to be another judge, another judgment, similarly defying parental rights, until more and more court cases do the same thing as this pinhead judge, and pretty soon it just gets moved into the national consciousness that this is the rightful role of judges, to deem parents fit or unfit based on their vaccination status. So there won't be any huge uprising. There won't be any massive court challenge over this. It will just slowly seep into America's culture and judicial system and politics that this is the rightful role of judges. It will become policy by silence, by tacit acceptance. The left is very good at moving the goalposts this way in America, and if we don't fight at the outset, this is how our country crumbles from within. Go back in time a year, year and a half, when we all allowed that it was government's role to stick us in our homes, to tell us to shut down our businesses, to stay out of work, to stay out of church, to stay off the streets. We didn't fight enough then, and so here we are now fighting for the right to parent our children. One judge can determine, based on vaccination status, whether or not a mother gets to see her child. The fact that he reversed decision has nothing to do with it. The fact that he actually thought he had the right to make that decision in the first place, that's the problem here. And so my guest today, Anthony Sabatini, as I said, he is an attorney and he is a member of the House of Representatives in Florida, and he is here on Bold and Blunt to give an update on how his legal battles are going in Florida and offer some advice and guidance to those in America outside of Florida who are sick and tired of the government overreaching, using the coronavirus as justification to clamp down on civil, constitutional, God-given liberties. And so, Anthony, thank you so much for being here on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, so you happen to be one of my favorite guests because you are fighting for individual liberties hard down in Florida, specific to the face mask mandates that came down over the last few months. What's the latest on what's going on in Florida?
Well, we had some very good news just a couple months ago. There was a lot of lawsuits commenced having to do with the face mask mandates along with some other COVID measures. And one of them, it was a case that came out of the town of Gainesville, where the University of Florida is, went up on appeal to the Intermediate Appellate Court. And the court judges that were put there by DeSantis, they're newer judges in our state, sided with the plaintiffs and actually declared that the face mask lawsuits are presumptively unconstitutional and violate the state constitution. More specifically, the privacy clause of our state constitution, which is in pretty much almost every state constitution in the country now. So we had a huge win. It got sent back down to the court for them to reanalyze and reconfigure, but then the case became moot because by that point in time, they actually got rid of the face mask mandate at the local level. So it was a win, but it came a little too late, and that's oftentimes the problem with some of these cases.
Yeah, but it's still the message sent, and that's good. That's always good news for individual rights to have that message underscored. The problem now that I see in Florida is that Governor Ron DeSantis has come out strong on the side of parental rights and individual choice, but schools are just saying, forget about it. We're going to do what we want anyhow. Lawfully, legally speaking, what kind of case do they have with that?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, in most states, the school boards are political subdivisions of the state government, so it's really kind of a mutiny. You have these local government entities that are part of the state telling the chief executive of the state, you know, screw you, we're just going to ignore your orders. And so they've really put themselves out there. Technically, we as a legislature and the governor as a executive have the ability to punish or remove those officials. So far, the governor's first step has only been to cut financial support, a small degree of financial support to the school boards. But I think I've been calling on him to, I think, go the full measure and actually remove these officials from office because it's utter lawlessness. And, you know, that's sort of a trend we've seen on the left where if they believe they're morally justified in whatever political position they have, they believe that they have the ability and duty to break the law. So it's quite shocking, but it's sort of become the new normal.
So you're one of the few who stand strong, along with the governor. You're one of the few in Florida who stand strong for individual rights, parental rights within the political system. What kind of support are you getting from your colleagues to call for harsher penalties on those, like that you said, are basically committing mutiny?
Well, unfortunately, right now, you know, in terms of my actual colleagues, the elected officials in the state, other than our great governor, I don't really get much support. There's a massive gulf. There's a sort of a difference, you know, just a gap between the actual Republicans, the grassroots, the actual voters, the people themselves, and their elected officials. And I've seen this, you know, at the state and federal level where there's just this chasm between those two types of Republicans, the elected and the actual voting public. And that's because I think the Republicans have become a special, you know, all elected officials have become a special political class that's separate from the electorate, and they're just not in tune. I mean, you talk to the people, and, you know, they say what they want. They know what they want. They want to be left alone. They want the COVID tyranny to end. They want to return to normalcy. But it takes courage for the elected officials to stand up to the special interests. And unfortunately, a lot of the Republicans just lack that courage and aren't willing to go the full measure and end the COVID tyranny. So there's still, you know, some pretty massive remnants of it, even here in the free state of Florida.
Yeah, is that what you see in Florida truly? that the citizens themselves want the freedom to choose because it's guaranteed by their American citizenship that they're allowed to do that? Or is it the media putting out that citizens actually want the governor to force face masks onto kids in schools? Which is it?
Well, it's obvious, I think, on the side of the Republican position, which is the position of parental autonomy and individual autonomy. And every parent who wants their child to wear a mask is going to make that child wear a mask. And if they don't want them to wear a mask, they're going to do that. I can't imagine anybody having the position of, well, I don't want to have to make that decision myself as a parent. Nobody has that position. Now, the media, of course, polls the question, but they do it in deceptive terms to try to make it seem like 50 or 60 or 65% in some cases of the public support the mandate. But that's because they're phrasing in a way where the public doesn't really understand that what they mean is they're taking away the parent's rights, the parent's choice. School choice, for example, here in Florida, the choice of a parent to assign where their child goes to school is overwhelmingly popular. It's why Florida has the most school choice in the country. I see the mask debate as it should be really in many ways a mirror copy of it. Parents want to be able to choose for themselves.
I'm glad you pointed that out about the skewed polling because I see that happen so frequently. And by the time it makes it to social media, it's just a one line that basically puts forth the vision of the left. And too many people don't question that. Too many people do not go back and read the actual phrasing of the poll questions. I would like your response on these forced vaccines that are coming.
Absolutely, and actually it's sort of a perfect question to lean in on because I saw a poll yesterday that says, do the American people want everyone to be forced vaccinated? And of course, the way they deceptively polled that made it seem as if more than half the country was for it. But of course, the proper way to poll it is, should people be punished, jailed, or fired for not being vaccinated? That's really the more specific, concrete way to phrase the question. And of course, if you phrase it in that way, I don't think you would even get 30% of people to, vote yes for that. So my position on the vaccine question is like anything on COVID. It should always be about individual choice. And I think it's almost absurd to push for a vaccine mandate, knowing that anybody who's at risk can go and get for free, literally for free, within just a few minutes, can go get vaccinated and therefore protected from the virus. So why would we mandate people who don't want to go do that to do so? I think anybody who wants to be protected can be very easily, and there's no evidence to show that mandating people who are not at risk is somehow going to help somebody who's at risk. The only thing that's going to help the person who's at risk is if that person gets vaccinated. So, for me, I look at the deeper issue here, which is it's really about the government takeover of individual autonomy, private health care, private medical and health decision-making, and just centralizing this question along with everything else, every economic decision. I think if we give in on vaccine and mask mandates, eventually they'll start to tell us what our dietary decisions should be, our caloric intake should be, and anything else having to do with so-called public health. So, Republicans need to stand strong, and the people need to stand strong, and they need to resist all vaccine and mask mandates because it's truly the worst of all precedents, I think, to create.
I think listeners should rewind what you just said and listen to it again because that's exactly what's going on. If you actually look at the data of the vaccine, if you look at the data of the coronavirus and do your own critical thinking, it doesn't justify the federal government, the private sector, anybody forcing people to take vaccines, and yet this is where we are. So legally speaking, it seems to me that the free market has been successfully weaponized by the left to force citizens to take the vaccines. Where do you see that headed in the court system?
Well, I think you're definitely going to see when it comes to government mandates a strong claim for a violation of due process and privacy rights. Silly folks and pseudo-legal minds in the media oftentimes quote or cite a famous case from 1905 called Jacobson versus Massachusetts, where an individual was forced to get the smallpox vaccine, a much more dangerous disease, by the way, I would add. But more importantly, that decision came before all modern jurisprudence concerning individual rights, privacy, due process, etc., and substantive due process. So it's sort of a silly case to cite in today's modern world, yet pseudo-legal minds still do it. We do know that today, with the very expansively understood and judicially construed right to privacy that we have today, that a good conservative judge or set of judges, say a Clarence Thomas, for example, would actually find the violation of that right, I think, from a mandatory vaccine, especially when there's no public policy to justify it. A person who does not want to be vaccinated, who's not at risk, there's no public policy to justify that person being vaccinated, since that person is not at risk. For example, if they're not elderly or have a debilitating condition, they have virtually no risk at all from COVID, which the media, of course, wants to cover up. So I think there's some good arguments that legal claims can be made, but of course, as a legislator and a lawyer, I lean very heavily on the legislature to just get in front of this and pass a statute to prevent it from happening to begin with before it even needs to be litigated. 2/3 of our states are, have either Republican governors or trifecta, Republican state senates, Republican state houses. We could very easily pass a statute that says that government or even corporations can't mandate personal health care decision-making in vaccines. And so we just need to do that. We still need to litigate it. There's still going to be, I think, some valid legal claims, but we can prevent everyone's wasted time and effort if we just pass a statute that prohibits states from doing so. The only state so far to do so, by the way, is Montana. Montana passed a law that says no employer, public or private, can include a mandatory vaccination or make employment contingent or conditional upon somebody's vaccination status. They basically made it a protected class, which I agree we should do.
Well, that's one state, and we still have scores of others that are actively allowing the private sector, private businesses to push people to take the vaccines. And look, I'm all about choice. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I do believe strongly in individual choice, especially when it comes to medical and health decisions for self and your children. So what advice would you give individuals right now who can't afford to just quit their jobs, but are put in a rock and a hard place by an employer who demands vaccines as a condition of returning to work?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is, actually it would be two pieces of advice depending on their specific situation. If they live in a very liberal or blue state, and it's really a hard blue state like in New York, or for example, and this is based on a number of things, but my advice to them would simply be to get out. I really think there needs to be a geographical realignment in this country because the point of the matter is, the vaccines are today, but Lord knows what's going to happen next week or next month or next year or even 5 years from now. You might as well go live in a place that at least believes in somewhat in individual liberty and freedom and is more akin to your values. So please come to a Republican state like Florida or somewhere like that. But if that's a person in a Republican state, what I would tell them is the best thing that they can do is to get politically organized and put pressure on their Republican officials to step up and pass laws that prevent this sort of infringement of individual liberty. I was talking to some folks this morning that said, hey, we're going to go and protest the liberal school board in Orange County, where the city of Orlando is in the middle of the state where I represent. And I told them, I said, you're wasting your time with that, considering the fact that all of the authority and power of those liberal officials in our state come from and stem from a legislature and a governor that are Republican. You should spend all your time, exert all your time lobbying your Republican officials to limit the power of the radical left Dems in the state, because that's who's really in charge. And the truth is that these Republican legislatures, just like we saw with the election, but more importantly, with the COVID tyranny, they have a lot more power than they let on. And if people get organized and loud and they exert that energy and influence on the Republicans, they can control the Republican-elected officials to stop the tyranny and create a state that I think is more akin to their values. And so that's what I would tell them. Two different pieces of advice depending on where they live.
Okay. Well, it seems like Florida and Montana are other places to move to at this particular point. Just one last question. You spoke about what could be coming from first the face masking, and now we're getting the forced vaccines. Where do you see this leading in terms of the vaccine passports, particularly when technology is factored into mandating vaccine passports on people's smartphones?
I think it's basically almost already here, and it's going to be up to the red states, red governors, to stand up and step back and say, no, we're going to fight you. Because the truth is, just like with the NCAA stuff, when the NCAA was trying to crack down on Republican states to say, no, we're going to allow transgender students, the truth is the NCAA doesn't want to go up against a bunch of big red states that control or situate half of the populace of the country. So if the Republican states, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, Arizona, across the country, stand up and say no to vaccine passports and don't allow either public or private employers, for example, the airlines, et cetera, to operate in their states under the impression that they can mandate vaccine passports, then guess what? Those woke corporations and other entities are going to stand down. But if the Republican state legislatures in these various red states do nothing and ascribe to the old, outdated Republican ideology that if somebody is a private corporation that you're not allowed to do or say anything to them and they can do whatever they want, then I think you're going to have vaccine passports. So really the decision is in the hands of these Republican legislatures, and it's time for them to act. And the citizenry needs to stand up and start to demand more of the Republican states. You know, we have Disney World here in Central Florida. They're now mandating that all 77,000 employees in their state, union and non-unionized, get vaccinated, and also violate their privacy by telling the corporation whether they are vaccinated or not. And so I'm trying to get the Republican officials to understand the threat to liberty this is, whether, aside from the fact that it's a private corporation, we need to be holding these giant woke quasi-state actors that are corporations, under the gun. We need to make sure that they don't invade the rights of our citizens, despite the fact that they're private, so-called private actors.
These are crazy times, and, Representative Anthony Sabatini, I really appreciate the fight you're making because you're kind of a lone wolf out there, so thank goodness and keep it up. Thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt and giving this update.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Love being on. Look forward to it again. Take care.
All right. At what point do you fight? At what point do the government mandates, justified as they are by the coronavirus and the coronavirus variants, at what point do they become so burdensome to you as an individual that you draw a line, not a fake red line like Barack Obama did with Syria years ago, but a real line? What's it going to take before you draw a real line and say, no, government, stop. You cannot cross. You cannot enter into this territory because this is the land of God-given rights. What's it going to take? Hopefully, more and more Americans will decide now is the time to draw that line. I want to thank you for listening. I want to remind you that if you like Bold and Blunt, please go to the Washington Times, find my name, Cheryl Chumley, hyperlinked, click on it, scroll down to the bottom of the story, and you will find some easy directions on how to sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter, which contains all my commentaries, along with links to my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts. They come out on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The newsletter is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday before noon. And also, if you are interested in other faith-based types of podcasts to motivate you, to inspire you, check out Edify, EDIFI. Go to Edify or download the app to your phone. But Edify is now the new host of Bold and Blunt podcasts. Go there, subscribe through there, and check out their other podcasts. Other podcasts, faith-based as they are, to buoy you through these hard, dark times. No matter which direction you go, no matter which choice you make there, I want to say thank you for listening. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.